for our noontime lunch special here with Microsoft and Stats Canada to kind of kick things off. Joining me, who will be kind of driving the bus for Microsoft, is Pauline Martin. And Pauline, when I was going through your bio last night, I came up with the keyword trailblazer because you've been in the IT business for 25 years, not to age you or anything, but more to compliment you. I mean, you're doing public sector work with the federal government and healthcare and whatnot. So I don't think it's I always love seeing women in tech, and I think you're an excellent example of what tech should look like, going into the 2020s. So Pauline, 25 years with information technology, and I'm going to pass it over to you so that you can drive this session. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. Really appreciate that. So nice to be here, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm going to give a bit of a 5-minute intro in terms of where Microsoft sees AI and the opportunities for government, some of our best practices and guidance. But what really excites me is getting our customers and our partners to share their stories. And so shortly I'll be introducing a customer of Government of Canada, Rob McLellan, CTO of Statistics Canada, to tell his story, as well as a close partner of ours, Duncan McSporran from Kognitiv Spark, who will be doing an interview back and forth with Derek Dobson, who is our leader in Canada for Microsoft Defense and Intelligence. So let's go ahead and get started. If you can advance to the next slide, please. So we see AI transforming government everywhere. There's tons of opportunity. I don't think that's disputed in any way. The data is immense, and data feeds AI. So we see opportunities across targeted citizen services and social programs to augment the capabilities of a back-end customer service or citizen service person to enable citizen engagement in new ways using functionality AI for accessibility, citizen feedback, and using all of that great citizen data that we have collected across agencies to plan and resource our programs in new and different ways. To optimize transportation, we see this one on the day-to-day in terms of traffic, public safety. And then when you look at COVID and what's happened in the world, we are seeing AI use cases in Canada today that are using artificial intelligence vision services to detect proper wearing of PPE as people enter a bus, to count and determine capacities before people enter to protect health and personal safety. Tax assistance and compliance. We do a lot of collection of money as a government organization. We also spend a lot of money. And so we need to make sure that when people are submitting their taxes, they're compliant. We look at that as a source of revenue for government. And coming out of COVID again, that's an important source to offset the spend that we have put into the economy. So can we use artificial intelligence to better assess who is completing their taxes, where taxes are being left on the table, and how can we help citizens and businesses to be more compliant? Additionally, on the fraud side, and we look at benefits modernization, for example, how can we use artificial intelligence to detect and prevent fraud before the money goes out? So if you can go to the next slide, please. I'll walk you through a bit of a methodology that we are seeing works very well to optimize your value from artificial intelligence. Especially in government, how do we define value? Could be defined in terms of citizen service, in terms of fraud prevention. And we're seeing a lot of single use cases crop up using artificial intelligence in these cases. But where we find greater benefit of that effort across your organization is when we define an AI strategy end-to-end that enables transformation of your organization throughout. If you can go to the next slide, please. One of the key enablers here is transforming your organizational culture. And that means integrating AI throughout your organization. AI is meant to augment human capability. So in order for us to deliver artificial intelligence solutions to augment what we are doing as an organization, a government organization in this case, we need to build partnerships across IT, developers, and the internal departments that are delivering those services so we can fully understand the opportunities and then use artificial intelligence to improve upon and augment that capability. Next slide, please. And one of the key things, linking back to the last session that we saw from Treasury Board, is, especially in government, how do we approach artificial intelligence in a way that is responsible and in a way that is trusted? So Microsoft brings to the table our 6 principles of artificial intelligence, which include fairness. Does a model represent the outcome or the recommendation for all citizens that have the same background, the same input to the model. Reliability refers to when a model is used, does it produce the same outcome every time? And in the event that it does not, how do we remediate? Who is responsible to bring that back in track? Inclusiveness refers to the opportunity of artificial intelligence. If we're going to provide a new service or deliver something in a new way, we need to make sure that it includes everyone and that benefit is fair and equitable. Privacy refers to those citizen data points, the personally identifiable information, the fact that we are protecting that information through our models. Transparency is sharing how that model is working. So a citizen can trust a model, an internal operations person can trust some guidance if they understand the steps taken to make that guidance. And from an accountability perspective, there always needs to be a human in the loop responsible for that artificial intelligence use case in the event that it impacts a human. And the last slide, before I hand the floor over, talks about how we can learn. We feel that skilling is going to be critical for AI adoption and the benefit of AI to come through. And it has to be skilling across the entire organization, not just technical skilling. So we've built an AI business school for government specifically that's free, available online. It has 4 modules. I've given you one slide from each of them as a teaser. Highly recommend it. Take it, share it, and you'll see in-depth examples from around the world, as well as tools and real capability growth opportunities for you and your team. I've included the link there, and I would encourage you to go ahead and take a look. So with that, I would love to introduce, it's my great pleasure to introduce Robert McLellan, who's the CTO of Statistics Canada. And Rob will be introducing you to his Data Analytics as a Service program, which is a transformational program. He's got a great outlook on the vision for this and some great near-term, what I'll call evidence that this is a working, creative way for government to move forward leveraging artificial intelligence. And I'm not going to steal his thunder. Robert, lovely to see you. Thank you very much for doing this, and I'll give you the floor.
Great. Thanks very much, Pauline, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here. A little cloudy and dark out, but lots of brightness on the screen. So I'm going to talk about some of the activities and really importantly, the lessons. I think that this highlights we've really been able to progress our agenda, our vision of transformation, of leveraging AI and data science to really change the yardsticks as to where we're going. So next slide, please. So COVID-19 comes along, all of a sudden everything breaks loose. What are we going to do? And I think the first thing to stress is StatCan provides analytic insights, models that really help inform sense-making of the world and what's going on in the country or at a province or municipal level. We are involved in providing models and access to semi-sensitive data under carefully controlled circumstances. And so it was natural for us to actually want to be involved and to help contribute to the gargantuan efforts that everybody's actually been making in this space. And so, one of the key things here, though, is where and how do we react? So one, we're an agency. So we have a building or a set of buildings at Tunney's Pasture. Now suddenly we're all working from home, just like everybody else. We've had an impact on that. We have all kinds of partners at different levels of government who are looking to generate, insights that are going to help them guide their efforts or report to citizens about how we're actually making progress. So I've shown here a capture from our website. Lots of good information there, and I've been quite proud of what we've actually been able to do in these very challenging circumstances. And this sets the stage then to the next slide, please. So. Before COVID came along, I think I originally created this slide back in January, which seems like a lifetime ago. If you look at the challenges that we have today and the kinds of action that we're trying to take, we've got social cohesion and inclusiveness as being something really of note to us. We've seen what's going on around the world as societies are stressed. We've got environment and energy. We need energy, but we don't want to destroy the environment. We've got climate change. We've got economic sustainability, right, particularly during COVID situation. And so all of these things really represent, I think, from a data and an analytics perspective, different stakeholders, different data sources, And it also represents multidimensional analysis. So how can we actually generate an insight for the opioid crisis, drawing on people's life history, and can we identify sort of correlating areas where it might actually allow us to take more focused action to positively impact the situation. Next slide, please. At the same time, of course, digital transformation is happening, and it's happening. And I think that the nature of that transformation occurs across multiple dimensions as well. So we live in glass houses now. There's a much higher degree of transparency, accountability. People are looking for authentic responses and engagement. The services that we provide are being disaggregated. People are looking to be able to pick and choose pieces. So for a statistical agency, for example, whereas in the past I might have done a custom survey for somebody and 18 months generate a result, with an associated price, people are actually increasingly looking to be able to work with us into controlled circumstances to generate their own insights or to go in slightly different directions, potentially to bring their own data. So again, we're responding to all of these transformation challenges through our modernization initiative, which we've talked about on a number of occasions. I think that we've seen the impact of social media. Who are the gatekeepers? How are decisions being made? How are opinions being formed? What's our role in all of that? So again, that's an important part of our focus. And then people are working from lots of different locations, right? People are consuming our results and our data from lots of locations. So again, if you look at the digital service blueprint for the government of Canada, certainly respects and reflects the nature that people are looking to access and be able to take action on information that they find on their terms. And so there are a number of these different sorts of things in play. And oh, by the way, technology continues to change pace. Next slide, please. So in focusing on our data analytics as a service platform, really it was about addressing some of these challenges that arise from transformation. So how do we actually increase the granularity of data that people can get access to and or see? How do we do things in a much more timely and responsive fashion? If you're trying to create some insights for COVID response, you can't afford to take 10 months to generate an answer. How do we take advantage of new data sources and so on to generate more interesting insights? I think I saw a reference to crop yield predictions, for example, or some sort of use of Earth observation data in the short Microsoft presentation. So again, we're active in all of these areas with our data science community, but we are actively engaged with external researchers in government departments, in academia, and others. And inevitably, they have a complex question they want an answer to. They're looking to see if they can find how they might answer that question. There are issues around data and sources and processing and how to analyze it, through to generating some outputs, some models, perhaps predictive models, and telling stories. You have to do something with this. Next slide, please. So when we break down our users, we interviewed over 300 external users, really identified a set of primary, secondary, and tertiary users. Primary users, it's important to stress that we can't just call them users or citizens. These are folks who are specialists. Some folks have a superficial knowledge they're looking to tell a story. They want the sort of ready, drag and drop visual stuff to hand to help support that. On the other hand, we've got research analysts, data scientists, and so on. In our secondary group, we have an important class often overlooked, which is that there are folks that have to curate. There are the data engineers, stewards. How do we actually ensure we've got high quality, robust, integratable, composable data to help people answer those questions internally and externally? Next slide, please. So we've done some persona analysis. We've done a breakdown, and I think the key thing here is schooling background, demographic detail, what their challenges, what their needs are, and what they're really trying to accomplish. We see a big shift going on, for example, to open source tool sets in terms of moving away from some of the proprietary COTS analytics tools. And this really reflects what's coming in from schools and other places in terms of the tool sets and so on that folks are using. And so this really helps us understand what we need to do to create some environments. Next slide, please. I think another thing that I thought I would just quickly touch on here, I've done a bit of work on this with the UnGlobal Platform work I'm involved in. So, if you think about Airbnb or you think about Uber, what we've got is an ecosystem of folks that have assets that they want to monetize. It's either a car or it's an apartment or a house. And then there are folks with needs. They want somewhere to stay or they need transport to somewhere. And then there's this platform that sort of helps sit in the middle of all of that stuff. And so I think an important thing to think about as we go forward is whether it's actually looking at our vendors, our cloud service providers, and our higher business capability providers, or, it's a health department in Ontario or Saskatchewan or something. And then there's various federal folks. We live in this ecosystem where folks have data, they need to produce insights, they need to share practices and methods by which they make that happen. So I think that this is an important area that we need to actually dig more into as we go forward to help us actually inform where we go next. Next slide, please. So I really want to stress partnerships. One of the things that I've been really thrilled about since March is just the way that Microsoft has worked with us. Speaking, completely objectively here, we have really managed to achieve some really important things using our Azure Cloud tenant in the 2 dimensions, which I'll show you in a sec. I think the other thing is that we managed to break down some of the silos within our organization. And then, of course, we continue to also work collaboratively with partners in other government departments. We can't do enough of this. It's really about overcoming it. And I think that this has been one of the really positive things I've seen with the COVID situation. Okay, next. So here, let's talk concretely about what we've accomplished. The first thing that I'm really proud of is the advanced analytic workspace that we've created. We've done this in collaboration with our data science experts led by Sevgi Erman at the Stats Agency. And what we've done is actually done a complete cloud native play here. We've got a bunch of open source tools that were deployed using container orchestration. And so we've deployed things like Kubeflow and all the other data science tools that people know and love. This was created together with folks from these different areas. The interesting thing here, too, is that we've actually had some interesting engagement with Microsoft on this one because essentially it's an IaaS play. But Dave Aronchek, who was the actual original creator of Kubeflow, actually works for Microsoft. So this is the fascinating thing is that you can be involved in both PaaS and SaaS services as well as open source, and we actually find welcome and useful advice from various parts of Microsoft. So if we go to the next slide. And so, as I mentioned here, this is a co-creation partnership. So my folks don't actually do data science for a living, although I think some of them dabble in it. But by actually getting together with the experts, the PhD data science folks from Sevgi's area, together with our cloud experts, we've actually been able to put something that really is scalable, meets their needs. They were hamstrung by on-prem, and we've done it in a time of COVID with questionable access to some of the normal resources. And this is something we're actually talking around the town and can co-create with. It's available in a Git repo. Next slide. The second thing that we've done is actually our collaborative analytics. So this is one where we started from scratch back in April, and we leveraged the rich set of PaaS and SaaS services that Microsoft has in the AI area and other Azure services. And so we've put together this collaborative analytics environment that takes advantage of things like Databricks, data lakes, and so on. And we've used this. We've managed to achieve a protected B, so sensitive data authorization from a cybersecurity perspective. We're actually using this today, supporting modeling activities, supporting personal protective equipment dashboard work that Health Canada and others are actually doing, working with all levels of government, and we've implemented cross-domain authentication and a bunch of really interesting technical things. So again, we managed to turn this one around really quickly. We worked really closely with the Microsoft architects on this, as well as also different folks within. And so this has really been a big success for us, and we've done this in record time. Next slide. So I think the other key thing to stress is that, it's tempting when we talk about innovative approaches and so on, to talk tech. And the reality here is that, innovation applies to a whole lot more than culture and organization. And, to stress the message earlier, we do this for humans. It's done by humans. It's augmented, amplified, and made tractable using technology. And it's done using observation. So we've actually taken a bit of an entrepreneurial model that we've tried to apply. We launched this in April, really to kind of create that tight focus on what it is we're trying to do, deliver value, target customers, borrow some of the concepts from a startup mindset. Next. I can't stress enough the issue here really around digital interaction. Folks often think about tech level. Well, I got a JSON file, we're good to go. Semantic interop is key. If you do not actually know what the semantic definitions are versus, data labels or vocabularies that you're putting together, you might actually end up with an answer that could cause you a lot of grief if you're basing a $100 million decision on it. Seems sort of evident, but I think that, again, this is where we're strongly trying to tap into some of the semantic technology layer that, we have with Microsoft, but also the ontologies and working vocabularies. The other key thing here is to talk about the legal piece, right? So if you're talking health data or related things, again, there are strong constraints and directives touching on the previous discussions vis-a-vis privacy and so on. So again, being clear on what this looks like, working with the cloud and text. We have some investigative work we're doing around homomorphic encryption. Got some PhD researchers working on that stuff with Microsoft again to talk about how we actually might address some of these issues. Next slide. So I think that's all for me. I want to leave a couple minutes for a Q&A. I worked at Nortel for a bunch of years and didn't survive if you didn't have a relentless sense of optimism. But I think that certainly I've seen a lot of excitement in my team at a time it is very challenging for folks. They've got families, their kids are at home, they're teleworking and so on. But there's been a lot of excitement, and I think that, as always, having line of sight to how you're making a difference, how you're responding, in the middle of the pandemic, it's not business as usual. I think that's been a great thing for us here in the public service, because sometimes, things seem a bit of a plod. The other thing I would say here is that, we've been able to actually move with speed, not with recklessness. And again, in a situation like this, the fact that, important decisions need to be made quickly has allowed us to actually really deliver some value together with our Microsoft partner. So a big thank you to my colleagues at Microsoft for their support. And I'll finish there. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Robert. That was fantastic. And a couple of things stand out for me. The collaboration, both within and external, is a big piece of this puzzle. And certainly you have many diverse internal and external customers. And you have to think of it that way. And what I'm so impressed about is that user-centric focus that you have. I'm wondering if you may have some comments on cultural change inside. How do you get all of the right people around the table so that you can gain that organizational understanding of what needs to be done?
I think that's a great question. I mean, it's a challenge. I'm actually going to draw on, I have somebody on my team who's got a fascinating background, and he brought up actor network theory. I think what you really need to do is to say, do we have a coherent, consistent vision? Do people understand their individual agency within that sort of vision and the approach and the strategy? We've got work to do there, but people, understand where it is they're going next and what their sort of independent degree of action is. So you need to make sure that people understand what their degrees of freedom are, and at the same time, make clear what the checkpoints need to be. And then I think there's a subtle distinction between, somebody once cynically said in government process is more important than outcome. But I think that certainly we've really tried to drive a strong sense of outcome driven by outputs and so on. So the other thing is we take full advantage of collaboration technology, we have daily stand-ups and so on with Teams calls and things. So I think that it's really about helping people understand where are we going, what's the important thing right now, and really to drive that dynamic sort of nature. I think the other key thing here is that there's this wonderful world of opportunity, really in terms of the services that are available, say, in the Azure offering and other cloud offerings. The world is our oyster, but people have to actually have strong sense of curiosity. They want to need to create. I personally believe all folks like to create. How do we remove their obstacles and the roadblocks? And skilling is obviously going to be another key thing. So I think lead by example also can't be stressed enough. It's a bit trite, but we have really fostered that sense of, we're making a difference. And the key thing we go and have a conversation with Health Canada, and they're really positive of what we've done. So are my colleagues. IT is typically seen as a roadblock, an obstacle. What do you mean you haven't got it done? What do you mean I need to know the server order 18 months ahead of time? And what we've actually been able to do is to create a short feedback loop, and nothing causes humans to change their behaviors like really getting positive feedback. So that's how it's happened. It's a journey.
Awesome. Thank you. Kevin, did we have any other questions from the audience for Rob?
Yeah, actually, I've got two here. One for Rob and one for more Microsoft, I would think. For Rob, it has to do with the data that Stats has, I guess the Canadian citizen data. It's like we talked a lot about consent in the last session, And
Yeah.
it's like, how do you like evolve the consent process or whatnot to enable you to use data in different ways than originally agreed to? Like, how is the consent process with Stats Canada? Like, what can Stats Canada do and not do with the citizen data?
It's a good question. So I will tell you that we are governed by the Statistics Act, and that spells out very concretely what we can do and what we. The second thing is that we are very strongly connected to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. So we take our privacy commitments very, very, very seriously. We also have a duty to notify and advise in terms of when we use data. So the first thing I will tell you, and it's certainly been true since I joined in 2011, is that we do not sort of randomly take data and smash it together to see if something interesting comes up. So if we want to actually do entity matching, do record linkage to be able to inform a specific set of analysis, we have an approval that goes right to the deputy head. We have to notify the minister, for example, of ISED, and we post it on our website. So we tell people what we're going to actually do with that data. So that's the first thing. The challenge we have around the consent model is that we are in the business of generating statistical insights. And so what we need to do is ensure that we have quality, and we have a deep methodology around that, around making sure that we have representative samples of data. Now, if you don't actually have that ability to get those observations, then it means that potentially the population that decides not to share them is underrepresented in your analysis. And that means then that they may actually lose out on government services, for example, because some of our outputs are actually driving things like indexing pensions. So what I would say to you is it's a sacred trust, and I think that we've been trying to really enhance and augment. Certainly, we're taking a privacy-driven design approach to ensure that we've got the transparency reporting, logging, and at the same time, the cybersecurity controls. It is highly governed as to what we actually do and with what and for what purpose. And we have to answer questions around necessity and proportionality. What is the social benefit from actually doing this activity with this data? Do you need that data? Have you looked at alternatives? And so these are all part of a very strong framework that the agency applies. And we have, sensitivity classification tools, again, that help us that. The cardinal sin in our business has always been really ensuring that there is no re-identification potential. So very, very strong culture, very strong rules, and we are, with our Data Analytics as a Service platform, augmenting and enhancing the way we actually manage that, taking full advantage of the various services that we get out of our Azure cloud services.
No, that's reassuring that there's such great guards in place protecting that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Data. That's very reassuring, even after that Treasury Board discussion at 11. Pauline, this question has to do with Microsoft tools, I guess, that would be available to stats and other departments in the cloud. So it's like, number one, is Microsoft developing like its own AI and machine learning tools? And then I guess a follow-up to that would be from like a partner network. We're going to learn more about Kognitiv Spark here in a sec as an example, but like, how do they get plugged in? Like, what kind of tools is Microsoft offering departments like Stats Canada beyond those that are purely Microsoft?
Absolutely. So, number one, Microsoft is meant to be a platform upon which our partners build better solutions, more industry-specific solutions to address certain and different challenges that are out there for government and for other industries. And so, yes, we do have a set of platform as a service AI capabilities, cognitive services such as natural language processing, vision recognition, and that sort of thing. And you'll see some of that. What happens with that is customers can use those of their own and build and develop upon them, or partners such as Kognitiv Spark will take a capability that is embedded and use the fact that it's managed and continually improved by Microsoft and build their own solution on top of it. So it really is a combination, Kevin. And what I'll add to that as well is the platform itself. We're seeing a lot of use of open source analytics tools on top of Azure. So the idea being a single platform, including Microsoft tools, including open source tools, including government's own designed analytics tools, genome sequencing, for example, for fish or for humans around COVID research. They all sit together on the platform. They leverage a common data platform. They can put boundaries around privacy and security and access in a singular way. And those partner solutions are really critical to helping people achieve bigger and better and more unique challenge solves through our partner intelligence capabilities. So I hope that gives enough of an answer. We can provide more background, but it really is a blend of that entire ecosystem on a single platform that we are looking to bring.
Yeah, I remember. I think Microsoft does have the largest partner network in the world. I mean, not surprisingly, on Azure. This one's more for Rob, and then this will be the last question because I know we got another half here to plug in. Is a government body working with a development team to design applications? Or clear roles to be played by domain experts in applied social and cognitive sciences, i.e. organizational behavior, ethics and governance, reasoning, and vision science or visualization design. So I guess they're asking where are there teams and where do these teams reside who are designing all these applications?
Okay. Well, I'll take a stab at it. So we have a large internal development dealing with both the evolution of legacy. We have a big cloud workload migration program underway. We have what we call subject matter specialists. So if we go off and look at the various social, economic, and demographic things, those folks are certainly domain experts around that. We certainly have an Office of Privacy Management and Information that are experts really around dealing with some of these things. Ethical use, we have a strong program with Chief Data Officer. We have Chief Privacy Officer. So again, I think we have a number of roles. The agency does a lot of that work itself, but it also works with industry partners where we're looking to supplement and grow. I think that one of the things for us today is that we really need to apprentice our people. You can't just send them a bunch of free courses. So we're looking to bring in expertise in areas where we really need to benefit from it immediately, but then also grow and create that culture shift. So I guess the short answer then is we've been in the business, for example, of privacy and non-disclosure of data for a very long time, and it's central to what we do. So we have some deep expertise around a number of those sorts of things. So, and ethics, of course, is always the other key thing, right? To the earlier conversation about the AIA framework, the reality here is that if we produce biased or skewed data by ethnicity or by language or culture or anything else, we have failed. Our business is to provide as honest and objective an assessment of Canadian society and activity. And so it's a key thing for us.
The minister's getting ready for his session at 1 o'clock.
Maybe that's a good time for us to hand over.
Rob McLellan, great to have you. Thank you very much. That's Canada. We're going to get on to the next session. Thank you very much, Rob, for joining us.
Okay, parfait. Thank you.
Pauline, over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks again. And so the next session is going to be focused on our partner, Kognitiv Spark. Duncan McSporran is the founder, Chief Operating Officer, and the Vice President of Aerospace and Defense for Kognitiv Spark. And he will be speaking today with Derek Dobson, and Derek is our leader for Defense and Intelligence at Microsoft Canada. Both have a long and esteemed history of military experience as well personally, and I think you're going to hear some great stories out of this one. So with that, I'll hand the floor to Duncan and to Derek. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Pauline. And then very quickly pivot to Duncan and the full Kognitiv Spark story. So data, AI, obviously is at the center of a lot of conversations at the moment around capability development and capability requirements in the armed forces. Really, all of that isn't a brand new thing. It's an evolution of something that started quite a long time ago with a concept called network-enabled warfare, and then actually moving on to something called data-centric warfare now. So you've seen a period of tech intensity leading to a period of data intensity. So what's changed then in the middle of that? I think the three things that have happened that we're aware of in the defense ecosystem that are changing understanding and cognition is really the fact that the threat environment has evolved quite significantly. The armed forces here in Canada and, of course, around the world find themselves in a new operating environment where they're both dealing with both the international competition between nation states and armed forces, whilst at the same time dealing with threats from non-state actors. And both of those actually happening at the same time presents quite a big challenge, especially when placed against the backdrop of the fourth industrial revolution, with data and technology at the heart of that. So So now the data is seen as a means of offset to provide competitive advantage and retain agility and decision superiority. So that's probably the biggest thing that's happened at the background. Also, though, at the same time, there are new domains have emerged in the armed forces, specifically around space and cyber. Traditionally, manoeuvre was always conducted in the maritime, land, and air domains, but we have space and cyber additionally now. And of course, data is seen as both ammunition in those spaces, but also as the resource that generates speed and accuracy of action. That's the second piece. But probably the third and most important piece is from that period of tech intensity into data intensity. We obviously, just at the armed forces, as we do in society, live in a world where the exponential increase of available data that's generated through various sensors has created a massive resource pool that can either be exploited or could slow things down. And so when you're in a world where you're generating insights through pervasive surveillance or persistent surveillance in all of the domains, radar, sonar, electronic intelligence, communications intelligence, etc., that's got to be collated, analyzed and disseminated quickly, and human beings find that difficult to do. So algorithms are being used to accelerate cognition. And on that acceleration of cognition and understanding, it happens both in the enterprise and in the armed forces. And basically, you're able to deliver new effects better, make better decisions, and obviously also prepare yourself for things without actually having to deal with them physically in the live domain. And at that concept of improved cognition and speeding understanding, I'll pivot across to Duncan. And Duncan, do you want to make some remarks about Kognitiv Spark?
Yeah, thanks very much, Tex, and thanks very much from all of the other speakers that I've been listening to. And one of the key things, and I think this really will become clear as we sort of go through this part of the discussion, is the resonance that you're going to hear about the importance of the human in the loop, and how really it doesn't matter where we're at in terms of our evolution towards artificial intelligence or computer vision or any of the other key capabilities that we will talk about in the context of the fourth industrial revolution. At the end of the day, and certainly this should be part of the sort of managed expectation of people's understanding of what those technologies are, there is always going to be somebody in that decision action cycle or in terms of the way in which they work. And it's really great to hear so many of the speakers today already reflecting on that. And I really sort of would be remiss of me not to start my part of the discussion without reflecting on that myself. So we work in one of those particular areas, and we've been very fortunate to work with a number of government departments here in Canada, and also to be partnered with Microsoft, who've really enabled us to articulate very clear use cases for some of those technologies, whether it's Internet of Things or mixed reality or computer vision in the sense of identification of objects. And really where we're at as a company is that we've created a mixed reality solution using augmented reality computer referred to as the HoloLens 2, which is a world-leading capability which was developed by Microsoft and released on the market about 4.5 years ago. And what that's doing is it's really creating a bridge between the data that Degs was just referring to and the analytic power of the human brain. And we're presenting that data in a way which makes it really meaningful. We're doing that simply to start with, to bring this into some really specific use cases. But at the end of the day, the drive to create a software platform which has meaning really has to originate from that end user. And as a result of that, our focus right from the point where we set the company up has always been to create a mixed reality or an augmented reality solution which works where the end user needs it to work and in a way which is beneficial to that individual. And again, we just heard from the previous speaker that one of the most important things in the human relationship is the fact that people want to be creative. Well, in exactly the same vein, people want to contribute to their team. And they want to feel that their contributions are valuable. And really what we find is that augmented reality solutions, such as the one that we have at market and is in use by the Royal Canadian Navy, really help that individual who may be tired, wet, cold and hungry, but at the same time needs that sense of purpose, and needs a unity of purpose in terms of what they're doing, a feeling that they're contributing to the team, but at the same time can be reticent to make a decision. So what better way of doing that than projecting an environment into their workplace where they can actually gain the use of that visualized data, or alternatively in a simple form, just over-the-shoulder support from an expert who can be anywhere in the world, and help them to do the next right thing and to do it as well as they could possibly do it. And we get constant feedback from people after they've started using the system at whatever level it is, whether it's at that sort of management level or at the actual sort of frontline piece in terms of bending a wrench or fixing a system or visualizing something which they've never seen before, and they go, wow, now I see that it's absolutely clear to me what I should be doing next or what the next decision should be. And all of that is enabled from, a piece of software which connects you to either the digital data or to the expert who has a better understanding of what that data means.
So Duncan, you mentioned there about being teamed with humans, and you're obviously teamed with the Royal Canadian Navy. Could you tell us a little bit the use cases and how you're teamed with the Navy to take forward their digital transformation agenda?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that's really worthwhile as well, again, is reflecting on the fact that the Royal Canadian Navy have really established a really straightforward approach to digital transformation. It is owned and led by the senior leaders in the Royal Canadian Navy. And they have a very clear understanding of where they want to go and the impact that digital capabilities, whether it's analytics, IoT, or mixed reality, will have on the sailor, not necessarily this year, not necessarily next year, but in the near future. And we received some really clear outlines of aspirational capabilities that the commander of the Royal Canadian Navy wanted to implement. And at the time, Admiral Lloyd, as he was the commander of the Canadian Navy, sort of had identified that mixed reality would help his sailors to do their jobs more effectively when they didn't necessarily know what to do next. And gave us a really straightforward mandate with some really challenging requirements in it, particularly revolving around security and low bandwidth. And basically just threw it on the table and said, right, can you do it? He initially said that to Microsoft, and Microsoft turned around and said, we've got just the partner that's working in that space and gets that really well. And we were brought into the conversation. And 5 weeks later, Admiral Lloyd, his team had the initial capability in their hands to start demonstrating that. And working with the marine technicians in the Royal Canadian Navy to validate the use case and then to identify what the future path to implementation of augmented and mixed reality in the Navy would be.
And you touched upon low bandwidth there. Can you tell us a little bit more about Remote Spark? Yeah,
so we're a Canadian company. You can tell from my accent. My broad New Brunswick accent, but I'm based here in Fredericton, New Brunswick. It's my home, and we've built a really world-leading team up here, which is really focused on creating that solution. We set ourselves up as a cybersecurity company to create mixed reality solutions, and that has led us down a pathway where we have created not only something that is very secure, but also that operates over low bandwidth. And we have Canadian Forces surgeons at the moment trialing the system for operational use between surgeons under the auspices of the Navy projects that we do in order to be able to guide a remote medic who is capable of doing surgery but has not necessarily done a project or not done a surgical procedure before, guided by a surgeon in Ottawa or in Halifax to do that. And in order to do that, they need to be able to verify that it'll work in a forward operating base or in an austere operational environment, wherever that might be. And that's really where we've put a lot of our effort to. And they've been able to do calls as low as 128 kilobytes in order to be able to facilitate that kind of work. But you can then take that's just a really good example for us to use, but you can take that to any task that you might be thinking about where somebody needs to have information or knowledge or expertise shared with them. That data could be remotely stored, or it could be just direct advice. Turn that round to the right, flick the switch, push the red button 3 times, I know it doesn't seem like that's what's going to work, but that will reboot the system. That instantaneous ability in austere conditions, low bandwidth, and with the highest security, really sort of when we demonstrate that capability to anybody, whether it's internally within the forces in Canada or externally with our commercial partners or armed forces around the world, then it has that immediate impact. We have one client who's basically gave it to their sort of continual improvement group on the shop floor, and 10 days later that continual improvement group came back with 240 use cases. And the reason they're speaking to us is because we can operate in that congested bandwidth environment, such as an industrial shop floor, or alternatively from a military perspective, a forward operating base.
That's fantastic. So we can see the clear utility for that, both for the Navy and the fleet, and obviously across the armed forces. What's next, Duncan, then? What's the next pound for you guys?
Interesting enough, again, I think it reflects on your opening comments and some of the areas, and we're looking at how we take that sensor data and make the sensed data that is collected from all of those platforms that are out there, whether it's IoT in an industrial context or whether it's battlefield situational awareness sensors in a military context, and bring that in so that it can be presented to somebody in the context of their workplace. And that may be a piece of terrain from a military area, and aggregate that information so that it has meaning, so that the individual's cognitive process is not applying undue fatigue. They're not interpreting data which exists on a two-dimensional screen or is being put up on a PowerPoint. Actually, what they're seeing is a true visualization of that sensed data. It's reflecting the fact that a piece of equipment isn't working, or it's reflecting the fact that they've detected something in a space where it shouldn't be. Well, what better way to do that than to take the data and actually sort of put it into a proper three-dimensional context, which is easily understood by the human brain, so that somebody can act and take, and really sort of can take advantage of that link between the data and what their role is in terms of the decision making. And then on top of that, I think it's really sort of pushing this out to the edge. So making sure that we maximize the benefit of all those edge capabilities that we talk about on a regular basis, whether that's disconnected edge capabilities, such as some of the data links that are enabled through low Earth orbit satellites, or whether it's disconnected by choice simply for security reasons, because whilst cloud computing is very much the future, a lot of organizations still have to operate under very strict protocols when it comes to connection to the internet. And we fully facilitate that and work with groups such as the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories and so on in order to create those on-prem systems which can be deployed on an Azure stack to meet those security requirements of no connection to the internet.
That's fantastic, Duncan. That's really comprehensive, and thanks for that. So you've shown us how you're partnered with the Navy, you're partnered with the Armed Forces and other commercial entities. You showed us how you're looking at the IoT environment, etc., as well, and bringing all that sensor data in, making it usable for the human being, and then applying it both in the enterprise sense, but also at that tactical edge. And clearly that further piece will be the next bound.
Yeah, and getting it in front of people. I mean, seeing it really is believing, and people don't get to the light bulbs all go on, like you gave that example with 240 use cases. They knew about the technology, but until they got it in their hands, there wasn't that sort of aha moment, that sort of road to Damascus bit where they go, oh, right, now I get it. And that's key, and we really sort of are very lucky and fortunate to be able to demonstrate those capabilities through partners such as yourselves to that market, both federally and commercially.
Thanks very much, Duncan. So just by way of a couple of concluding marks to maybe top and tail this piece, I think we covered a lot of ground in our short discussion together. We can see that there's a huge amount of utility for data and AI in the armed forces space, both in the enterprise and the operational area. We can also see that some of the use cases you've talked about augmented and mixed reality, and how that can be brought to the human to improve an understanding, both in a really practical sense, not just in sort of academic sense. The areas where we see the future of the armed forces as driven or as codependent upon AI and technology are quite interesting. I think you've touched upon them. Firstly, we talked about decision superiority. So I mentioned in my opening remarks about all of that data and how it gets ingested and turned into something that can drive better decisions. We're seeing the use of that to accelerate activity in the void cycle, observe, orientate, decide, and act, not just in the physical domains, but also in cyber domains is interesting. 85% of cyber alarms being estimated to be false alarms. You can actually help use AI, can sift through that noise and make better decisions. That's an uninteresting piece. We also see another piece around autonomous platforms, and we talked about human being there, but there is a degree of autonomy that's interesting from autonomous platforms that operate in all of those domains themselves. But obviously, autonomous vehicles don't need to necessarily stop for rest, etc. So we've got AI moving in the physical maneuver space and overcoming some difficult environments without constraints on altitude or depth. So that's interesting too. And then moving, obviously, of course, into the enterprise space. One of the use cases that we see being exploited across all defence departments rather than the Canadian Armed Forces is the BI tools that others are using to make better resource management decisions with their manpower and logistics planning. And that drives on to the whole aspect of predictive modelling that can be used to improve maintenance, warehousing, network distribution, etc. So lots of use cases there. I think the final piece is I would come on to looking into the future, and I can see you're very well positioned with that which you're developing with your team and your partners. The areas of individual training themselves, so synthetic environment is being used to understand the tasks in front of people in preparation, but also during the tasks that they're being expected to conduct in a lot of operational environments as well to prevent skill fade is interesting. And the final one, which I was going to touch on, and you covered absolutely beautifully in your description of the use cases that you're covering, is battlefield medicine itself. So AI certainly being used in a lot of different guises there, autonomous casualty collection systems and platforms, AI-driven diagnostics, or to improve the diagnostic capabilities of those individuals who are perhaps a little farther forward than necessarily the fully trained medic, and also to help in actual treatments, robotic surgery systems, etc. It's very interesting. So lots going on without minimizing conversations that were in previous discussions about the ethics and the frameworks and lots of policy frameworks that need to be put up. But we can clearly see a massive path forward, both in data, AI, and its practical application, and the sorts of solutions that you're providing in Kognitiv Spark bring that human into the loop and make sure that it is indeed being used to improve understanding of the human being rather than fully just automating system background. So that brings that piece to a close from my perspective. I don't know if Pauline is could pop up if we've got some more questions. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions here from the audience. One of them is just fundamentally, Duncan, from a Kognitiv Spark perspective. I mean, who came up with the idea, and what's been the journey been like? Tell us a little bit about the startup and how it's evolved.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting story. I just recently left the British military. I was seconded to the Canadian military here, and decided that we wanted to stay, and was introduced to Ryan Groom, who's my partner in setting the business up. And Ryan had a cybersecurity background. I had a sort of very end user focused background in terms of problem solving, and Ryan had been introduced to the HoloLens under NDA before its commercial release. And we were sat on a walking holiday in Scotland. I know this is very prosaic, but that's the way it was. We were drinking some whiskey, and he'd just been released from his NDA, and he said, "There's this amazing piece of kit that's just about to be released on the market, and I think there's a massive opportunity." And really, we sort of set the company up to really, like I said, make mixed reality work where the end user needs it to work. Very much from those personal experiences of, I know where I could have used that, and so again, it just comes back to that human experience piece. We weren't trying to take something that pre-existed on a two-dimensional platform and jam it onto the Microsoft HoloLens. We came at this with a completely clean sheet, and that served us incredibly well in terms of the technical advances that we've been able to make in conjunction with the Microsoft product teams. But also importantly, again, I should mention them here, the really great applied research teams that we work with at the University of New Brunswick and New Brunswick Community College, so Scott Bateman's team in particular at the Human Computer Interface Lab. And it's great because we get that constant chatter and excitement, as you hopefully get from the tone of my presentation. There's so much out there that we can address this with, and especially in the context of being a Canadian solution, that's fantastic that we're out there on the cusp of the wave.
I love how it all started with a whiskey or scotch. It's what's in that scotch that makes fosters good ideas. You don't need to answer
innovation.
That.
Innovation.
Pauline, over to you for.
Yes, I'd just like to say thanks again, Duncan, for sharing that tremendous story. I'll always remember seeing now retired Admiral Lloyd on stage in full military dress with the HoloLens, and for the people on the outside, we could see him waving his arms in the air, but what he was actually doing was following very intuitive directions on how to maintain a piece of military equipment quite easily. And that's a game changer when we look at naval operations, to keep the ships afloat, keep them at sea instead of having to bring them back. So great example of user-centric design. Just a couple of closing comments. One of the things that you've heard throughout this session is the value of bringing everyone around the table, the users, the potential consumers of the product of AI, but also all parties that are impacted by AI, privacy, security, IT, developers, and third parties. The collaboration there is critical to getting the most value and really defining something that is there for a purpose. We've all seen lots of cool proof of concepts. If they don't have a basis in business value and operational value to the government, they will go away and they won't be adopted, and it will harm the culture of AI for the future. So we've been doing design thinking workshops with a number of our clients to help facilitate that process, and happy to do that with anyone who's interested. Responsible approach, cross-departmental collaboration, learning from each other and joining these communities. And again, back to the skilling piece, because when it comes to AI, we want everybody included, everybody involved. Those diverse perspectives will balance the ability of that model to be unbiased, to be well-rounded in what it does. And so by skilling everyone in the organization, irrespective of their functional role, you will get better value and better output from those models. And I'll close on that. Any closing comments for you, Kevin?
No, that was beautifully done, Pauline.
Thank you.
way to wrap it up. So thank you very much, Pauline, Duncan, Derek, Rob with Stats Canada, and of course the Microsoft team. Great to have you with us today. Thank you very much. We're going to take a very short break here. We've got the Honourable Minister for Digital Transformation from Quebec appearing. He will be addressing the audience in French, naturally, so I've copied a link in the chat that enables you to get live translation for our Anglophone viewers. So we'll be back very, very shortly with the Honourable Minister. Thank you very much.